Hey guys, thanks for joining me today at BookLove. My name is Ember and I'm really excited today because I'm doing something a little different. I decided I was going to do a author spotlight. So I've displayed some books here around me for the author that we're going to talk about, and that is Naomi Novik. Naomi Novik was born on April 30th, 1973, so happy birthday coming up soon. She grew up in Long Island and currently lives in Manhattan with her family, her husband, and her daughter. And her bio also says 6 computers. And that might seem kind of strange, but Naomi actually studied literature at university, but she also got a master's degree in computer science. Before she decided to become an author, she actually helped develop a video game, Neverwinter Nights: The Shadows of Undrentide. Soon after that, she discovered that she'd rather write than do computer programming. And I'm actually kind of glad that she figured that out because I love her as an author. I've read almost all of these books that she's published and I really enjoy her writing. So that's why I was really excited to kind of do a spotlight on her and talk about some of the books that she's written. And hopefully, if you've read some of hers or if you haven't read some of hers, you can be inspired to check her out. So Naomi's books are mostly considered historical fantasy, alternate history, or speculative fiction. At the age of 6, she read The Lord of the Rings, which is crazy because that is a huge book, especially to read at age 6. So that kind of spurred on her love of reading. She also soon fell in love with Jane Austen. So that tells you a little bit about her personality or her writing, where there could be a lot of kind of witty, funny stuff and also a lot of just good hardcore fantasy. Something else I found out about Naomi that I thought was interesting is that she's a second-generation American. So her father's family are Lithuanian Jewish, and then her mother's family are Polish Catholic. And I feel like that has influenced some of her writing stories, and we'll kind of talk about that more in a minute. Okay, so let's start with the first books that she put out, the Temerair Series. Now this is an omnibus that has the first 3 books in the series, which includes His Majesty's Dragon, Throne of Jade, and Black Powder War. Then we have Empire of Ivory, Victory of Eagles, Tounges of Serpents, Crucible of Gold, Blood of Tyrants, and League of Dragons. Now, I haven't read these last 2 books in the series yet, but I've read all the other Temerair books. The Temerair series was published between 2006 and 2016. These books are really exciting and really fun to read because they are kind of an alternate history fantasy set during the Napoleonic War. So in this timeline or whatever, there are dragons and they are everywhere, which hopefully you figured out from the covers. But anyway, they're actually used as part of the military. So our main character, Lawrence, he is a naval officer in the British Navy. And of course, they're fighting this war with France and Napoleon and things. He comes across a dragon's egg and he is in the process of transporting that back to the country and back to the king and the military leaders who would then distribute that egg to whoever was going to be the pilot of the dragon once it hatches. However, the dragon hatches early and forms a bond with Lawrence himself. And so he then becomes a pilot of a dragon in what they have as their Air Force. So these books are really interesting. They're very fun to read, very creative. There's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of adventure and military kind of goings on as Lawrence and Temerair kind of go on their missions and kind of save the world in a way. I do recommend these books for sure. They're very good. I had my 14-year-old read them and he loved them a lot. The only thing I would mention to potential readers is just that the language in the books, it's not 100% fully like Old English, Elizabethan, hard to understand, but it is a little bit more formal, especially when they're speaking to one another. And so as you read the books, I feel like you pick up on that really quickly and it gets to be very easy to read. But I remember at first when I was reading them, I had to go a tiny bit slower and just think a little tiny bit about the language and especially the dialogue between characters. But after that, you know, it got really easy and it was fine. And really, honestly, wasn't that big of a deal, but I would just like to let you guys know. So this book series has actually gotten 2 different awards and been nominated for 2 more. If you want to find more about those, you can just Google it. I'm not going to spend the time to go over all the awards that her books have earned, although quite a few of them have won awards. The next book I'm going to talk about is called Will Supervillains Be on the Final? Now, this is a book I do not have and I actually haven't read. I didn't even know it existed until today when I was kind of looking up these to make sure that I knew the books that she's published. Anyway, this is a graphic novel with the manga art style. Only volume 1 has been published so far. This story is set in the Liberty Vocational University, which is kind of a university that trains superheroes. This book has been compared a little bit to things like Sky High. And in this story, the main character is Leia Temur, and she has the special superpower of being able to manipulate atoms. So that's why she gets accepted to this school. And apparently the classes, you know, are supposed to teach you how to be a superhero and make your brand and all of those things. But of course, there's going to be a plot twist where maybe supervillains are trying to influence these new learning and budding superheroes. Will Supervillains Be on the Final was published in 2011. Next, we're going to talk about Uprooted. Now, this is a book that I very recently read because I just barely found it at my local independent bookstore. I was so excited to find it and the store, honestly. But I already knew that I had liked Naomi Novik's writing, and then I saw this and I was really excited to find another book by her. So even though this book's pretty new to me, it was actually published in 2015. In this book, Uprooted, the main character, Agnieszka, and I tried to look up how to say that, so I hope I did it right. She lives in a valley that is not surrounded, but a good part of the border of this valley has what they call the wood. And this wood is a very sinister, evil place. Bad vibes, you know, and also creatures will come out of the wood and try to carry away the different people who live in the valley, or attack them or infect them. That's the main thing that happens. Even spores coming from the wood, or you know, water tainted by the wood. If you drink that, or if you grow a crop and eat that on accident, that would then corrupt you and you would basically be transformed and kind of turned into some sort of a devilly evil creature. So at the beginning, Agnieszka is just kind of living her life, enjoying wandering and feeling anxious too, because the dragon, who is a kind of mysterious wizard I don't want to say overlord, but he is lord over the valley, and he is there to protect them and basically keep the wood at bay. The dragon, he comes every 10 years and selects a maiden from the valley who he then takes to his tower, and the girl stays there for 10 years and then she returns home and typically doesn't really stay in the valley, like decides to leave and move to a different part of the country. But it is the year that Agnieszka and all of the girls her age, which I believe was 16 or 17, he will come and choose one of them. So this story I thought was just really, really interesting, really well written. I loved the character Agnieszka. She was really fiery and fun and smart, very strong-willed, and how she learns to interact and live with I don't want to say that because that's going to give stuff away. Anyway, the way that her story unfolds with the rest of the valley and with the dragon, very, very good, very interesting. I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was quite unique. You do find out more about the wood. Very cool and intriguing, such a very creative story. And as I was looking at information about Naomi Novik, she said that this book was inspired by Polish stories and Polish songs, which I assume that she heard growing up, which I thought was really awesome and made this even better. Also, can I just point out, I sort of mentioned the art on the front of this book, but it is absolutely amazing. I love it. It's like a woodcut kind of a thing. I just think it's fantastic. So young adult, definitely read this book. You will not be sad. It was fantastic. Okay, next is Spinning Silver. Now, this book was published in 2018. I actually ended up reading it in 2019, and it was one of my very favorite books that I read that year. I really thought it was fantastic. Again, let's just point out the art because it and Uprooted are very, very similar. Maybe they got the same artist. I should have looked that up, but I love it. It's so cool. This story is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. Now, sometimes retellings are great and sometimes they aren't, you know, because you can have a preconceived notion about what the story is going to be like. I really liked her spin on this retelling because in it, Miriam, she is the daughter and also granddaughter of a moneylender. And in this book, you kind of see a lot of the Jewish history, I think, that Naomi Novik had, because this character, she is Jewish as well, and her town that she lives in, the country that she lives in. So anyway, her father is a moneylender in a small town and basically not very good at it. You know, he's too soft-hearted, he's too kind, he lends money and keeps track, of course, but he never insists on the repayments. So because of that, Miriam's family, her and her dad and her mother, have basically dwindled down all the money that they have and really have none. So most times they go hungry, their house is leaking, threadbare clothing, you know, shoes that can never get replaced. They just don't have the money. So at the beginning of this book, a little ways in, Miriam decides that she's had enough of that life and she's going to be the one to go and collect what is due. She becomes kind of the money lender in her father's stead. She hardens her heart so that she can go and just say, I'm sorry, you have to pay something. So anyway, in it, you know, things evolve where she's becoming successful and her family's finally starting to get things back so that they can live a life. And people are amazed that she's, you know, basically collecting money and taking silver coins that then she can exchange for gold coins. So she starts to gain a reputation of being able to turn silver into gold. In the front flap, it mentions that she kind of boasts about that one time. And so that's where the real problem starts. Now, in this world, there are a race, I guess you would call it, of kind of fae creatures. They are called, I think you say it, Staryk, S-T-A-R-Y-K, Staryk, and they will come and pillage the mortal world where she lives and take things that are gold. They're obsessed with gold, and they're kind of creatures that don't necessarily live in their world but come through it. It's a little bit of a gray area until you find out more about it as the story goes on. But the king of the Staryk kind of magically overhears Miriam's boast, and so he then makes a bargain, or basically kind of an ultimatum to her, because he needs more gold. Anyway, so this story, there was a lot of intricacies. I loved how it was very, very developed. Like, it's not just, hey, Rumpelstiltskin, whatever. It had a lot of cool depth, a lot of different facets. The characters in it, Miriam and the ones who she kind of comes into contact with, and they become part of her story. Very interesting and very thought out. Also, there are some twists and turns in this book, especially partway through, like halfway, that I definitely wasn't expecting and wasn't looking for, but they were very, very cool, and it made for an absolutely satisfying read. Like I mentioned, it was one of my favorite books. I rated it 5 stars in 2019 when I read it. I highly, highly recommend this one, absolutely. And just so you know, that book has also won some awards and been nominated for other awards, so feel free to look that up if you're interested. Okay, last but not least, today with our author spotlight is the newest book by Naomi Novik, and it's called A Deadly Education. Now, I went to that same little local bookstore that I bought Uprooted from a few weeks later and saw this little book and thought, I gotta have it. I read the inside cover and it sounds really interesting. And I do also have to point out how beautiful this cover is. It's kind of that matte, satiny feeling, black, and then this shiny gold. I, of course, just saw this spine at first, and of course that caught my eye. But also, I just have to show you guys this. The art inside the front cover is of this school that the book takes place in. Look at these drawings, aren't they just so cool? I love stuff like that in books. So this story takes place in a school called the Scholomance, and it is a school for witchcraft and wizardry. And I know what you're thinking, this is like a Hogwarts thing. And in fact, in my mind while I was reading it, I was thinking, you know, this is like Hogwarts like for reals though, you know? Just the nitty gritty, and it's a school for witchcraft and wizardry for sure, but it is absolutely a different kind of environment than, you know, one you might be familiar with. And it was actually so fascinating to read this book. I really enjoyed it. The main character, her name is Galadriel, and a little nugget there from Lord of the Rings, which that's so awesome. I loved it. But she goes by Elle, and she's in this school, the Scholomance, and how it works is it's this special school that was designed back in history by geniuses of magic who created it and put it in what's called the void. So it's kind of like not really reality, but outside of reality, and the goal was to keep young wizards and witches safe as they learned magic. Because if they are in the real world, then these monsters, Maleficaria, or Mals for short, they can sense young, budding, kind of prepubescent wizards, because that's when they start to kind of come into their mana or their magic. And so these Mals just kind of hunt them down and eat them. Magically and literally a lot of times. So anyway, young wizards in the real world, or in the wild, if you will, their life expectancy, or the percentage that actually could make it to like adulthood, like 18 to 20-year-olds, was quite low. And so these geniuses in the past decided to create this school where they would have the students, the young kids who have magic abilities, they would go to it and then they would study, and then at the end of 4 years they would be graduated and they would go out back into the real world, and now they should be strong enough and, you know, toughened enough that they can take care of themselves. But this is not a nice, sweet, coddling place. There are actually no school teachers, there's no headmistress, headmaster, there's no custodians. The students do everything, and the school itself almost has sort of a personality where if you are trying to study something, you can go to the library, for instance, and you can go to the section on that, but it might not show you all the books that are there. You have to like keep your concentration or learn different tricks of being able to find books that you want. Or sometimes, for instance, Elle was asking the school to get a book on a cleaning spell, and it gave her all sorts of other things other than a cleaning spell until like her 5th try. So the school has a mind of its own, and it kind of tries to influence what you can learn, your projects that you have to submit. So it was all very fascinating how she had written this and the thought that she had put into it. And of course the story was super interesting too. In the very beginning, she talks about maybe considering murdering one of her classmates because he saved her life. So it's a very cutthroat kind of a school where the tough survive and the weak don't. But it was a really interesting read, and I really enjoyed it. Seeing how Elle kind of navigates this, her junior year in the school. So this book is the first in what's planned to be a trilogy, and the second book, which is called The Last Graduate, is due to come out this September 28th, which I'm absolutely going to get and be reading for sure. So the other cool thing I found out about this book is Naomi Novik was inspired by something she read in middle school at the library. She was looking up, I don't know why, but she was looking up different kinds of schools for wizards and witchcraft and stuff like that, and found an account that talked about the oldest supposed school for witchcraft and wizardry called the Scholomance, and this school is supposed to be run by the devil himself, and the students were cloistered away in a dark facility for years and years and years, learning magic under the tutelage of the devil. And so this is actually a quote from her website about that. She said, "I've been imagining its story," the Scholomance, "I've been imagining its story. Who are the students in its classrooms, and why would they or their parents accept the price the school exacts?" So that kind of gives you a sneak peek into this book, and I absolutely recommend it. So you should read it. All right, guys, well, this is the end then of my spotlight for Naomi Novik. I hope it was interesting learning more about her as an author and a person, and also hearing about some of these awesome books that she has written. I really think she is a great writer and has a really good way of bringing her worlds to life. And also there's quite a lot of variety here to me, and I really like when authors can kind of have a bunch of different types of stories, because that's always motivating for me to read more of their books, and I don't feel like I'm going to get the same thing rehashed every time. So I absolutely think that you should check out Naomi Novik if you haven't already. If you are a fan, or if you've read any of these books, let me know which ones. I would love to talk to you about them. Or if you have any more questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. I'm also going to go ahead and put the links for Naomi's social media in the description box below, as well as my Goodreads link too, if you want to see more of what I'm reading and when I'm reading it. That's all I have today. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you later. Bye.